All right. I was asked to share with you a few thoughts about the bread of life. And we have been in cooking school. You have seen some of my wife's artwork from cooking school. And, yeah. I think that's what it is. It's called, what is this, like White's Kitchen or something? So in White's Kitchen, I was able to come up with exactly the thing that I was talking about for today, for this thought. Aha! Let's see. Yes, bread of life. Interesting. I've just brushed my teeth, and here I'm into food again already. Means I gotta brush them again. But it's good. Partly because it's from White's Kitchen. But the other part is that it's just good. Now, in the Bible they talk about bread. And I'm sure it refers to something like this, although it probably is a little different. It could even refer to maybe some veggies, like this. We're getting this stuff all over the place. Well, anyway, it's good. So I'll take the tail off this. And in a sense, we could think of this as bread of life too. I mean, it's food. When you think of bread as related to in the Bible, you think of food, you think of nourishment. That's what it's all about. Actually though, back to the bread. When I was about 22 years of age, I think somewhere around there, 22 years of age, probably. I grew up in a family. My parents were farmers. My mother did all the housework, plus many of the chores out in the yard. And she also was in charge of making bread. Not bringing in money to make the bread, but making the bread in the kitchen. So when we got married, I asked my wife to make the bread, because that's what I knew. My mother made the bread, so my wife should make the bread. Now, I could tell you this story, but I know better than to tell you this story. Because if I told you the story, it'd be altogether different than if you got the true version from my wife. So my wife is coming over here, and she's sitting right down here right now, and she's going to tell you this story. Come on over. I know she's shaking her head. It doesn't matter. You're in perfect shape. Come over and share this story with everybody. Sit right where I'm sitting. I don't know if they'll see you. I'll check and make sure they can see you. Yeah, they can see you.
Well, come and sit down then.
All right.
This is bread I have made. The crackers I haven't. But this is bread I have made. But when I first was married, I had never made any bread. And when my husband asked me to make the bread, I went out and bought some frozen dough, and I made him a loaf of bread. Well, he ate it, and then he said, "That was good, but when are you going to make homemade bread?" So I got out my cookbook, and I read the instructions, looked at the pictures, and I made the bread. And my husband was so kind as to let me know that it was the best bread he'd ever tasted. And so I keep making the bread because it pleases him. And now I'm leaving.
Yeah, so anyway, that hasn't changed too much. The bread still is really, really good. And comes out of the oven just right. That's when I like to eat it. That's when I shouldn't eat it, but that's when I like to eat it. So, as we've already said, in the larger context, we can think of bread as food in general. She always makes the food for us in the kitchen. Always. There was a time, I think once, that she offered to let me do something. But after that, she says, that's okay, I'll take care of it. Because on that attempt, I nearly burnt the water. Well, you know, if you burn the water, you're in serious trouble. So I said, no, I think you better just take care of this. Now, Jesus was tempted. He was tempted to make bread from a stone in the wilderness. We find that record in Matthew 4. There were 3 temptations that were given to him, and one of them was making bread from stone. Well, you know, there's nothing wrong. I mean, he turned water into wine later on in his ministry. So making bread from stone, there shouldn't be anything sinful about doing that, except that he had a dedicated purpose for being in the wilderness. His purpose was to prepare for his ministry later on, and he wanted to have close connection with his Father in heaven, and so he kept that as a very special time where he could fast and communicate, and he didn't want the devil to tempt him to interrupt that conversation. You can read all about it in Matthew 4. I once knew a man who said, there is no way that I could turn stone into bread. But he said, if I really wanted to, I am sure that I could turn bread into stone real quickly. So he could do the reverse. And I think you have a little idea of what he might be thinking of. Then there was the experience that millions of people, these people were called children of Israel. They had bread on a daily basis. Their bread was called manna, came down from heaven. Now, I don't know what it looked like. I have seen pictures of what people suppose it might have looked like. I'm guessing it probably was white in nature, much like snow. And they could go out and they could pick it up every day, and they could gather as much as they wanted to eat day by day. But if they had a little bit left over and wanted to save that for the next day, it would spoil. Wouldn't be any good. They couldn't use it. The miraculous part of that was that they did that on Sunday, on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But when Friday came, they were asked to pick up a double portion. And they picked up the double portion. On picking up the double portion, they had enough then for Friday, and then they also had enough for the Sabbath, the 7th day of the week. And it did not spoil. So that was the one time of the weekly cycle that it would not spoil. Now talk about there being a 7-day weekly cycle. This is a good indication of how that can happen. So here's how bread, thoughts on bread of life, can fit into a whole story about the weekly cycle and how that the Sabbath is such an important day. But we're straying just a little bit. Then there was, let's see, in Matthew 6 verse 11, it talks about Jesus. And Jesus was in prayer to his Heavenly Father. At that point, he said, give us this day our daily bread. Well, that apparently has reference to the fact that he knows that we need nourishment to sustain ourselves on a day-by-day basis. You may have known people who decided that they would not eat or they would not drink. Now, you can get along without eating for a while. Jesus did it in the wilderness for 40 days. But you can't get along too long without liquid, because that will begin to shut down the internal organs of the body, and soon they will begin to fail, and life itself will cease to exist. So anyway, bread is an important element. Give us this day our daily bread. In other words, he doesn't want us to go hungry. You know, Jesus said, I am the breath of life. I am the bread of life, yes. Whoever comes to me will never be hungry. Whoever believes on me will never thirst. And that's found in John 6. John 6:32-35. We will want to live lives that are so in harmony with his beliefs that we will never hunger, we'll never thirst. There may even come a day when trials and tribulations are so great that it'll be nearly impossible to live our current lifestyle. That may happen. We need to learn to lean wholly on Jesus. However, Jesus tells us that we don't need to stock up for times of temptation or times of trial, times of tribulation. We don't need to make a special effort to stock up for those kinds of events, because he will supply all our needs when we need such things to happen. So the best plan is just commit ourselves to his beliefs, to his leading on a day-by-day basis, and then we'll have no fear of the past, the present, nor the future. So as you think about bread of life, just keep in mind that the true source of our bread of life is Jesus.